What if I told you that one old, worn-out coat given to a stranger woman at a freezing bus stop, not knowing she was a CEO, would change his life forever? That a homeless man with nothing left but hope and a powerful CEO with everything but warmth would collide one snowy night in the most unexpected way? This isn't just a story about charity or chance. It's about how one small act of kindness sparked a chain reaction that would shake the heart of a billion-dollar company, reunite a broken family, and lead to a wedding no one saw coming. It all began on a freezing night in Springfield. A man named Michael, jobless, alone, and sleeping in his rusted truck, gave his only coat to a shivering woman he didn't know. He didn't realize she was one of the most powerful women in the city, and he never expected her to come back for him. Stay with us because what happens next is more than surprising. It's powerful, it's emotional, and it will change the way you see the people around you. If you believe in second chances, real love, and the magic of human kindness, this is a story you won't want to miss. The winter wind howled down Elm Street in the small town of Springfield, flinging snow and swirling gusts that stung like needles against exposed skin. The city was quiet, blanketed in thick snow, the kind that muted footsteps and softened even the harshest corners of reality. Beneath a flickering street lamp, at a lonely bus stop, Michael Thompson stood hunched and shivering in a threadbare olive coat that had long since lost its warmth. He clutched a weather-worn folder to his chest. Inside were 5 resumes, 5 copies of hope already crushed by silence. At 45, Michael had once been a respected structural engineer. He had built schools, libraries, and fire stations, places that mattered. But that life felt like someone else's memory now. Ever since cancer stole his wife, everything had unraveled. First the savings, then the house, then the custody of his only son, Jake. What remained now was the back seat of a rusted-out pickup truck parked behind Oak Ridge Industrial Yard, and the ache of a man trying to find a way back to the world. The bus was late. The cold had seeped through his socks, gnawed at his bones. He exhaled slowly, watching the breath curl into the air like smoke from a dying fire. Then, from across the street, the sound of heels echoed sharply on the icy pavement. A woman appeared through the snow. She looked out of place, mid-30s, impeccably dressed in a pencil skirt and silk blouse, hair clinging to her cheeks from the snow, arms wrapped tightly around herself. No coat, no umbrella, just vulnerability hidden behind designer makeup. She stepped under the same awning, her lips trembling, eyes wide and searching. Michael tried not to stare. She was stunning, not just in the surface way, but in the way her posture betrayed exhaustion, pain, something unspoken. She rubbed her hands together, failing to warm them, trying to pretend she wasn't freezing. He turned away, heart heavy, but then a sharp gust of wind cut through, and she flinched. Her teeth chattered. She looked so fragile, and suddenly Michael couldn't ignore it anymore. His coat wasn't much, worn thin, a few loose threads, but it was all he had. Still, without a word, he shrugged it off and stepped toward her. "Hey," he said gently, "take this." She blinked in surprise. I can't. You need it more than I do." He gave her a tired smile. "I've already lost everything else today. This is the only thing I've got left to give." Before she could protest again, he draped it over her shoulders. It hung awkwardly on her frame, but she pulled it tighter without realizing it. The scent was faint, like old soap and something warm, maybe coffee. "Thank you," she whispered. They stood in silence for a moment. Then her voice cracked through the snow. "What's your name?" "Michael. Michael Thompson." She offered a small nod. "Emily. Emily Parker." He gave a soft chuckle. "Nice to meet you, Emily. You really shouldn't have given me your coat," she murmured again. Michael shrugged. "Probably not. But I couldn't just stand there and let you freeze." A low rumble signaled the arrival of the bus. Its headlights sliced through the snow as it slowed to a stop. Emily stepped forward, then turned back. "Do you have somewhere to go?" He hesitated. "Somewhere," he said vaguely, not mentioning the frigid truck behind the warehouse where he'd crawl into a nest of blankets and try to convince himself he still had a plan. She reached into her purse and handed him a small card. "In case you ever need something." Michael took it, slipped it into his folder without looking. People said things like that all the time. They rarely meant it. She boarded the bus, pausing once to glance back. The oversized coat wrapped around her like a strange kind of armor. Michael stood there, arms folded tightly across his chest, watching as the bus disappeared into the night. He didn't feel cold anymore, not physically. Something else had taken over, something harder to name. As he made the slow walk back through the empty side streets, past shuttered storefronts and hollow alleys, he let the memory of Emily's face replay in his mind. He didn't know why he had helped her. Maybe she reminded him of someone. Maybe he just needed to feel human again, to prove to himself that he was still the kind of man who gave, not just survived. Michael reached his old truck, nestled in the shadows of Oak Ridge Industrial Yard. Snow piled around the tires. He climbed in, pulled a frayed blanket over his legs, and opened the glove compartment. Inside was a small dented tin box. He opened it carefully. A photograph. His wife Sarah, radiant, laughing. His son Jake, just 7 years old, with that same mischievous smile. "Good night, Sarah," Michael whispered. "Good night, Jake." Then he leaned back, eyes open to the darkness, holding on to the last few pieces of himself. Emily Parker stepped into the lobby of her luxury apartment building in downtown Springfield. The sudden warmth inside wrapped around her like a soft blanket. The doorman greeted her with a polite nod, but she barely noticed him. Her thoughts were tangled. The worn jacket she now wore felt absurd over her high-end blouse, out of place in her world of sleek suits and business deals. But she didn't take it off. She rode the elevator in silence to the 28th floor. Her penthouse was dim, spotless, and silent, the kind of silence that echoed, the kind that reminded her she lived alone, even at the top. Emily slowly peeled off the coat and was about to hang it by the door when her fingers brushed against something inside the pocket. Curious, she reached in and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was worn, nearly falling apart at the creases. She unfolded it carefully. It was a child's drawing, 2 stick figures under a crooked sun. One was labeled Dad, the other me. Between them floated a red heart. At the bottom, written in shaky crayon, were the words, "I love you, Daddy. Jake." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her polished nails trembled against the paper. She stared at it for a long time, unmoving. Her eyes burned. That man, Michael. He wasn't just some stranger in the snow. He was a father, a man still holding on to the memory of a child who clearly loved him deeply, a man with nothing who still gave everything. Emily slowly sat on the edge of her plush leather couch, the drawing in one hand, the jacket in the other. Her mind spun back to her own childhood, not the polished boardroom executive she was now, but the scared, hungry little girl sitting on the icy steps of St. Mary's Church, hoping someone would notice her. Back then, she didn't have a coat either. But someone had noticed. A man whose name she never knew had wrapped his coat around her shoulders and said just one thing. "You'll be okay." She never saw him again, but she had never forgotten the warmth of that moment. It was the first time in her young life that anyone had treated her like she mattered. That memory had been buried for years under ambition, success, titles, stock options, until now. She looked again at the crayon drawing. The sun was lopsided, the stick figures awkward, but it was filled with more love than anything she'd touched in years. Emily wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of the coat, the same coat Michael had wrapped around her without hesitation. She hugged it to her chest. It still smelled faintly of something real, maybe laundry detergent, maybe coffee, maybe just comfort. The next morning, she stood in her office at Parker Tech HQ. A coffee cooled on her desk, the drawing beside it. The skyline of Springfield stretched out beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, but she barely noticed it. Her mind was with Michael. He'd given her more than a coat. He'd reminded her who she used to be, someone who once needed kindness too. She rang a small silver bell on her desk. Moments later, her assistant Rachel appeared in the doorway. "Yes, Miss Parker? I need you to help me find someone." Rachel blinked. "Of course. Who?" "His name is Michael Thompson. He was at the Elm Street bus stop around 8:30 last night. He gave me his coat." Rachel's eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. "I'll get right on it." Quietly, very quietly, Emily said, "This stays between us." What followed was a flurry of quiet activity, traffic camera footage, cross-referencing bus routes, background searches. Her team, usually used to tracking down venture capitalists and software engineers, now had one target, a man who lived in the shadows. 2 days later, Rachel returned with a thin folder. We found him. His name's Michael Thompson. Used to be a licensed structural engineer. He hasn't held formal employment in a while. No current address, but he's been spotted near Oak Ridge Industrial Yard. He sleeps in his truck, alone. Emily flipped through the folder, a worn driver's license photo, an old resume, a printout of a child's school photo, probably Jake. Her throat tightened. She closed the folder slowly. I want to go there. Miss Parker, we can bring him here if you prefer. No, she said. I need to go there myself. An hour later, her black SUV pulled up beside the snow-dusted industrial yard. Through the slush and gray, she spotted the old Chevy tucked into the corner, rusted and still, its windows fogged from breath inside. She stepped out, ignoring the cold, and approached the truck. The door creaked open. Michael stepped out slowly, blinking at the daylight. His eyes widened when he saw her. Emily, he said, voice rough with sleep and surprise. She gave him a small smile. Hi, Michael. He glanced down at his worn clothes, the truck, then back at her. What are you doing here? I came to find you, she said simply. He crossed his arms, defensive. Why? Because I couldn't stop thinking about you. About what you did. About that drawing in your coat pocket. He hesitated, clearly unsure. You didn't have to come here for that. A thank you card would have worked. It's not about thanks, she said. It's about not letting something good go unnoticed. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Finally, she reached into her coat pocket and gently handed him back the drawing. I believe this belongs to you. Michael stared at it, then back at her, eyes misting. He nodded slowly, unsure what to say. She smiled, soft and genuine. Michael, would you come with me? Just for an hour. I want to show you something. Michael hesitated for a moment, staring at Emily, unsure whether to trust what was happening or retreat back into the safety of solitude. But something about her expression, the honesty in her voice, the way she was holding that crayon drawing like it was gold, softened him. All right, he said quietly. Just for an hour. They drove in silence. Emily didn't try to fill the space with small talk. She respected the quiet, and Michael appreciated it. Outside, the skyline of Springfield gave way to old neighborhoods, then to a quieter street lined with trees that had long since shed their leaves. Finally, they pulled up to a modest red brick building with a hand-painted sign that read, The Shelter, a safe space for every child. Michael furrowed his brows. What is this place? Emily stepped out and motioned for him to follow. Come see. Inside, the warmth hit immediately, not just the temperature, but something deeper. The walls were painted in bright colors. Children's handprints decorated the hallway. Laughter echoed from somewhere down the corridor. This is where I go, Emily said softly, when I need to remember who I am. They passed a reading nook filled with secondhand books, a playroom scattered with puzzles and games, and a kitchen that smelled of fresh bread. Volunteers moved through the rooms with ease, helping kids with their homework or braiding their hair. I was one of these kids, Emily continued, bounced between foster homes. Sometimes it was fine. Sometimes it wasn't. One night, when I was about 10, I ran away. It was freezing. I curled up on the church steps down the block. She looked over at Michael, her voice growing gentler. And a man, a stranger, took off his coat and wrapped it around me. He didn't ask my name, didn't say much, just sat with me all night. Michael stood in silence. He wasn't sure what to say. I never forgot that moment, she whispered. And when you gave me your coat the other night, I realized it happened again. You reminded me that kindness isn't just something people remember. It's something they live because of. She turned to face him. And I think the world needs more of that. More of you. Michael blinked. What are you saying? I want to offer you a job, not charity. A position here at Parker Tech or here at the shelter, wherever you feel more at home. Something new, something meaningful. Michael hesitated for a moment, staring at Samantha, unsure whether to trust what was happening or retreat back into the safety of solitude. But something about her expression, the honesty in her voice, the way she was holding that crayon drawing like it was gold, softened him. All right, he said quietly. Just for an hour. They drove in silence. Emily didn't try to fill the space with small talk. She respected the quiet, and Michael appreciated it. Outside, the skyline of Springfield gave way to old neighborhoods, then to a quieter street lined with trees that had long since shed their leaves. Finally, they pulled up to a modest red brick building with a hand-painted sign that read, "The Shelter, a safe space for every child." Michael furrowed his brows. What is this place? Emily stepped out and motioned for him to follow. Come see. Inside, the warmth hit immediately. Not just the temperature, but something deeper. The walls were painted in bright colors. Children's handprints decorated the hallway. Laughter echoed from somewhere down the corridor. This is where I go, Emily said softly, when I need to remember who I am. They passed a reading nook filled with secondhand books, a playroom scattered with puzzles and games, and a kitchen that smelled of fresh bread. Volunteers moved through the rooms with ease, helping kids with their homework or braiding their hair. I was one of these kids, Emily continued, bounced between foster homes. Sometimes it was fine, sometimes it wasn't. One night, when I was about 10, I ran away. It was freezing. I curled up on the church steps down the block. She looked over at Michael, her voice growing gentler. And a man, a stranger, took off his coat and wrapped it around me. He didn't ask my name, didn't say much, just sat with me all night. Michael stood in silence. He wasn't sure what to say. I never forgot that moment, she whispered. And when you gave me your coat the other night, I realized it happened again. You reminded me that kindness isn't just something people remember. It's something they live because of. She turned to face him. And I think the world needs more of that. More of you. Michael blinked. What are you saying? I want to offer you a job, not charity. A position here at Parker Tech or here at the shelter, wherever you feel more at home. Something new, something meaningful. Michael stepped back slightly. Emily, I don't even have a working phone. I sleep in a truck. I haven't worn a tie in 10 years. You don't need a tie, she smiled. You need to believe you still matter because you do. He looked at her for a long moment, overwhelmed by the sheer gravity of her sincerity. No one had said those words to him in years, maybe decades. What would I even do? Talk to people. Share your story. Remind them what it's like to feel invisible and what it means to be seen. Help us build a better culture, from the inside out. She reached into her bag and handed him a folder, simple but clean and professional. Inside was a job offer, a stipend, a new beginning. Michael stared at it for a long time. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He just quietly folded it and held it in his hands, like it might vanish if he looked away. A week later, Parker Tech's main office was buzzing with an energy it hadn't seen in years. In one of the small corner lounges, a man with warm hands and kind eyes sat beside a group of junior developers, laughing with them, listening to their worries, sharing his own. Michael hadn't just accepted the offer. He'd embraced it. He was given a modest apartment in a safe part of town. He didn't ask for much, just a desk, a coffee pot, and a wall for photos. He added one immediately, the crayon drawing of him and Jake, now framed in wooden glass. And just like that, change began. People who had once rushed past the janitor in the hallway now stopped to say hello. Managers began checking in, not just on productivity, but on mental health. The work didn't get easier, but somehow the office felt lighter. One morning, Emily stepped into Michael's office. He was wearing a button-down shirt, a little wrinkled but clean. His eyes were brighter now. The hollowness in his face had begun to fade. You've started something, Michael, she said, handing him a coffee. He smiled. You did. A few months later, Jake, now a freshman at a local community college, moved in with his dad. Their first dinner in their new apartment was nothing fancy, spaghetti and garlic bread, but for Michael, it was a feast. Jake looked around the small kitchen and grinned. You really kept your promise, Dad. Michael smiled, tears quietly gathering. I told you I would. Word of Michael's story eventually leaked to the media, not from Emily or the company, but from a photo an intern posted of a thank you wall he'd created in the break room. The story went viral. From homeless to hero, the man who changed a company with a coat. And then one day, Emily surprised Michael at a special company gathering called Kindness Day. She stood on stage before a packed atrium. "A year ago," she said, "a man gave me his coat at a bus stop. He didn't know I was the CEO of anything. He just saw someone who was cold. And in that moment, he reminded me that kindness isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up when no one else does." She pulled a cloth off a frame behind her. Inside was the very same coat, preserved beneath glass. Next to the frame was the crayon drawing. Below it, a bronze plaque read, "One small act can rewrite a life." Then she turned and looked at Michael. "Would you come up here?" He rose slowly, wearing a plain gray suit. The room erupted into applause. But Emily wasn't done. She handed him an envelope. "This belongs to you." Inside was the title deed to his new home. GPS Cheers. But Michael raised his hand. "I've got something too," he said. From his pocket, he pulled a small box. "I kept this ring in that coat pocket for years. I never had the chance to use it. Never thought I would." He turned to Emily, his voice trembling. "But if that coat brought you into my life, maybe it's time I took one more chance." He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring, polished with care. "Emily Parker, will you marry me?" The room fell silent. And then, her eyes brimming with tears, Emily laughed through the emotion. "Yes, of course, yes." They were married 2 months later at the shelter, surrounded by children, coworkers, and people whose lives had been touched by a single act of kindness. That old coat stayed framed on the wall, a reminder to every visitor that you don't need wealth,